how's it going? In today's video, I'm going to walk you through my best of both worlds setup, using my favorite amp, the Wang Polaris, and using the Axe-Fx 3 from Fractal as a post-amp effects processor. So over the last year or two, as I've gotten more into modeling and the digital products out there like the Fractal Axe-Fx 3, the FM3, and now recently with the Neural Quad Cortex, it's so easy to get a great sound, especially when you're working and trying to work as efficiently as I am here in the studio tracking guitars, not having to fiddle with miking an amp, getting a really clean, direct sound, not worrying about other variables. You know, it's a really practical solution. But it's not the same. It definitely isn't the same. And what I don't mean is it's not the same as playing an amp in the room, just sitting in front of an amp. Because that is a different experience, but that's never ever been recorded. Like, that's not an experience that you have making music. But what I do mean is the feel and the sound of a tube amp that you know every knob, what it's going to do, what it's going to feel like, instead of using a model of a different amp for every song. Kind of having a go-to, I think, is the way to go. That's always the way it was before there was really access to as much modeling and capturing devices as there is today. You know, you had your one amp, and if you got a new amp, it's likely because you traded your old amp. And I think that there's something to that. So just having a really special relationship with one amp that kind of is the center focus, it's the main part of the whole sound system. For me, that's the Wang Polaris. It's an AC30 killer 112 combo that can get into that tweed territory, but it also has this great edge of breakup sound using the charm switch. That's my default position. And the way that I have this routed, there's a few fancy ways that you can do it that are a little more complicated, and I have done them, and we'll explore a couple today. But the main way, mostly because it's just the easiest that I'm using this, is utilizing the Fractal X-Load. You can see it on top of that Deluxe up there. And basically that is coming out of the speaker out from the Polaris amp and converting that, going into the Axe-Fx, and with the Axe-Fx using post-amp processing just for delays and reverbs. Another cool thing you can do is, I've got all these pedals down here, I could plug into a pedal board for pedals going into the front end of the amp, and then the Axe-Fx is freed up to do all, you know, post-amp things. Or the way that we're currently running it, using a Humbuster cable, I'm going into the Axe-Fx, and I've got some effects that are for the amp, then it goes into the input of the Polaris, then through the X-Load, back into the Axe-Fx, into this stereo signal. So right now, I'll turn this off, and you can hear I've got a cab sim going on here. And what I'm doing is I'm just using predominantly this EV12L and the 12S, kind of blending those. It's my favorite speakers. It's in that Little John Dumble style cab my wife and I made. I've got two EVs in there. That's just my favorite speaker. And again, you can get option paralysis scrolling through the thousands and thousands of IRs that there are out there. So just having something that you know, that's your go-to, that sounds great, I think is the easiest way to go. Now, sometimes I will incorporate this 112 G12 T100, and then also the 112 divided by 13 CJ11 cab IR. I will incorporate those sometimes, as well as just, you know, giving a little bit of more character to the IR. But here's what it sounds like. I've got all the effects off. So we'll start with the neck pickup here. I'm playing my Tausch 665 Raw Deluxe here. Shit. So one of my filming lights, the bulb just blew there, and I don't have a replacement. But moving on. I'm playing my Tausch 665 Raw Deluxe, and here is the sound on the neck pickup. So that's straight through. There's no effects. If I turn this Aurora multi-delay and the reverb, which are basically always on, and I've got them on an expression pedal here. So that's down, and I can, you know, make it really wet. Kind of leaning in on that expression pedal, but we'll leave it down for now. I can throw a compressor at the beginning, and this is going in front of the amp, so into the actual input of the amp. It's just a different sound. I really like the sound of a pedal compressor. On most of my pedal boards, I've got 2 compressors going kind of at all times, and so it's something that I really like, but you know, it does make a crazy world of difference. But then I've also got, you know, I can kick on a drive pedal. So let's see, what do we have here? We've got like a hot cake. If I want a more pronounced delay, I would switch to this other delay block. Or I could have it also in parallel with that Aurora delay. You know, it's just, this is kind of my go-to basic sounds, and there's room, you know, to add some really specific effects if the song calls for it. But really, you know, I need something that's a little cleaner, a little dirtier, and then having, you know, my wet effects, being able to lean into it with an expression or back off. It's never, to be honest, I never have it completely off. I mean, this is about as dry as I ever get, unless it, you know, something of course will come up that needs to be completely bone dry. But you know, this is kind of my go-to. This is where I'm going to start with a cleaner sound, go in an in-between position here, either 2 or 4. And I just found, you know, that it really sounds natural, especially with this guitar, for doing chordy stuff. You can hear it's just kind of on the edge there if I really dig in. It's just got a really good old school sound, and it just sounds organic, natural, woody, whatever buzzword you want to put in there. That's what I'm really going for, is for it to not sound really, I don't even like want you to be able to hear the effects or the amp or the guitar. Like, I just want it to sound like the music. And I think having things like, you know, 99% of the time I'm going to use that amp. And it's going to keep up and do killer at 99% of the things that I need to do. These are the sounds that I'm going to be using the majority of the time, you know, and having the go-to IRs. It makes it really clean. I've done the wet, dry, wet setup, and I have this E906. You know, it's basically lives right there in front of that Polaris. And there are times where I will do the wet, dry, wet, so that I have just an organic amp in the room, you know, that's just straight ahead with the mic just right in front of that speaker. And I can also still use the X-Load to capture IRs. That's a flavor thing that I'll use sometimes, and really when it needs to sound less pure, like if there needs to be a lot more character and artifact, that's when I'll play around with adding the mic in a wet, dry, wet. But ultimately, you know, I want to get to the point of tracking the right part, writing the right part, and for the arrangement as quickly as possible. Having my go-to IR, my go-to amp is the best way to do that. In a world of excess with all this gear around me, in a world of excess with all these modelers and capturing technology, it's really easy to get hung up on the sounds. And it's the most fun thing, but it's not always appropriate to have the most fun with the sounds. You know, ultimately, if you're getting hired to play guitar on something, the more efficient you can be at getting the sound that the song needs so that you can play the part is the priority. And I feel like this is a tool that really helps me do that. And it's, like I said before, the best of both worlds. You know, if I'm going to play a gig, I'm probably not bringing the Axe effects, but I might bring the FM3 for wet effects, or a pedal board that's going to have, you know, wet effects that are either going in front of the amp or behind or something. But I'm going to be taking that Polaris and throwing a pedal board in front of it, and this is the kind of quicker way to have that all rigged and routed up to kind of do anything. As powerful as the Fractal is, and there's incredible amp sounds in there, of course, but they're not amps that I have my hands on, that I play 99% of the time. And really, I just get bogged down in trying to make them feel and sound as close to what I'm familiar with or what I prefer, which is that amp right there. And I kind of feel like this is the best way to do that for my use case. If you're running a hybrid rig, I would love to know the way that you're doing that, what you're accomplishing by having the best of both worlds, and how you're routing everything down in the comments below. It's a quick little video just kind of demoing this fun best of both worlds setup. It's been my go-to since I moved into this new studio here in downtown Los Angeles. So this is the sound that I'm using. I think there's going to be some really cool ways in the future that you will be able to experience and play this setup. So stay tuned for that. Check out Eddie Wang Instruments and his amps that Quantum's in, and my favorite, the Polaris. See if there's a dealer near you where you can play through one of Eddie's amps and just feel this feedback loop, how connected you can be with an amp when it is hand wired. Every component is intentionally placed, and it's made to help you sound like you. As always, please like if you've liked and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Until next time, I've been Colin.